Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a sergeant in the U.S. Army, served 3 tours in Afghanistan, and I've got a Purple Heart sitting in a box back home that I earned the hard way. But that Thursday morning, sitting in my apartment staring at a deleted text message, none of that seemed to matter to the one person who was supposed to love me unconditionally. My little sister Jessica had just uninvited me from her wedding. The text was brutal in its simplicity. Sarah, I've been thinking, and maybe it's better if you don't come to the wedding. It's going to be really formal, and I just think, you know, love you, you know. Those 2 words hit harder than the IED blast that left shrapnel in my left shoulder. You know what? Exactly. That I wasn't good enough for her new life. That my sacrifice meant nothing when it came to impressing her future in laws. I set my phone down and walked to my closet, where my dress blues hung like a monument to everything I'd given up for this country. The ribbons told a story Jessica used to be proud of: the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, the Purple Heart, the Combat Action Badge. When did protecting freedom become something to be ashamed of? Have you ever had family make you feel like your biggest accomplishments were somehow embarrassing? Like the very thing that defines you is something they'd rather hide? Because that's exactly how I felt sitting there, remembering how proud Jessica used to be. When I came home from my first deployment, she threw me a party. When Dad died and I carried his flag at the funeral, she sobbed and told everyone her sister was a hero. When I got promoted to sergeant, she posted about it on Facebook with 3 American flag emojis. But that was before she met Bradley Whitmore III. The Whitmores weren't just rich, they were Connecticut old money rich, the kind of family that had portraits of ancestors hanging in their library and used summer as a verb. Bradley's father owned a chain of luxury hotels. His mother sat on the boards of 3 different charities, and they spoke in that particular way wealthy people do, where every consonant is perfectly enunciated and every vowel sounds like it went to Harvard. Jessica had been dating Bradley for 2 years, and I watched her slowly transform. She started getting her nails done professionally instead of painting them herself while we watched Netflix. She traded her Honda Civic for a leased BMW. She stopped eating at Applebee's and started posting pictures of meals that cost more than I made in a day. The changes weren't just superficial. She started talking differently, using words like gauche and pedestrian. She'd correct my grammar during family dinners. She winced when I mentioned grabbing a beer after work or shopping at Target. And somewhere along the way, she started being embarrassed by where we came from. Our dad had been a mechanic. Our mom cleaned houses before she got her nursing degree when we were teenagers. We grew up in a 3 bedroom ranch house with a chain link fence and a vegetable garden in the backyard. It wasn't fancy, but it was filled with love, laughter, and the kind of values that taught me to serve something bigger than myself. Jessica used to understand that. She used to be proud of our parents' work ethic, our family's resilience. She used to brag about how I was the first person in our family to join the military, how I was serving our country while she finished college. But the Whitmores didn't see honor in service. They saw uniforms as blue collar, military families as common, and our background as something that needed to be managed. I found out just how much they needed to manage it 3 weeks before the wedding, when I overheard a conversation I was never supposed to hear. I'd stopped by Jessica's apartment to drop off her birthday present, a necklace with Dad's dog tags that I'd had specially made. She wasn't expecting me, and I used my key like I always did. The apartment was one of those modern places with an open floor plan, all granite countertops and stainless steel appliances that Bradley's parents had helped furnish. Jessica was on the phone in the kitchen, her back to the door, and she didn't hear me come in. "No, Mother Whitmore, she won't be a problem," Jessica was saying, her voice taking on that strange, affected tone she'd developed. "I've already handled the Sarah situation." I froze by the door, my hand still on the keys. "I know you were concerned about the optics," Jessica continued. "A military person at the country club might send the wrong message to your friends. Don't worry." I told her the wedding was family only, very intimate. She bought it completely. My stomach dropped. Family only? The wedding had 300 guests. I'd seen the invitation list. Of course, I didn't mention her background, Jessica went on. The diner job, the enlisted rank, all of that. If anyone asks, I'll just say she couldn't make it. Work commitment or something. Diner job. She was talking about the part-time waitressing I'd done to save money for college before I enlisted, something I'd done for 6 months, 8 years ago. But apparently, in Jessica's new narrative, that's all I was, a diner waitress. Not a decorated veteran, not someone who'd risked her life for her country, just an embarrassment to be managed. You're absolutely right, Jessica said, laughing that new laugh of hers that sounded nothing like the sister I'd grown up with. Bradley's groomsmen would have no idea what to talk to her about. It's better this way. Cleaner. Cleaner. Like I was a mess that needed to be swept under the rug. I backed out of the apartment quietly, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. The necklace felt heavy in my hands. Dad's dog tags that represented everything our family stood for, everything he'd taught us about integrity and service. That night, I called my buddy Marcus from my unit. Marcus had grown up in Detroit, enlisted straight out of high school, and had zero patience for people who looked down on military families. Let me get this straight, he said after I'd told him everything. Your sister is marrying into money and decided you're not good enough anymore? She thinks I'll embarrass her, I said, staring at my uniform hanging in the closet. She told them I work at a diner. Sarge, Marcus said, using my rank like he always did. You've got a Purple Heart. You saved lives in Kandahar. You carried wounded soldiers to safety under enemy fire. And she's embarrassed because you once served food to pay for school? She's embarrassed because I'm not polished enough for their world. Their world? Marcus's voice got that edge it took on before he said something that would probably get him in trouble. Their world is built on the backs of people like us. While Princess Jessica was playing dress up with Rich Boy's credit card, you were keeping terrorists from bombing their little country club parties. He had a point, but it didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. You know what you should do, Marcus continued. Show up anyway, in uniform. Remind everyone exactly who you are and what you've sacrificed. I can't do that. It's her wedding. It was her wedding. The moment she decided your service was something to be ashamed of, she made it about more than just her big day. After I hung up, I sat in the dark, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The long deployments, the missed family gatherings, the nights I'd stayed awake writing letters home while incoming mortars shook our base. I'd done it all believing I was protecting something worth protecting, not just American soil, but American families. Families like mine. But apparently my sacrifice only mattered when it was convenient for Jessica's narrative. I thought about Dad, who'd been so proud when I enlisted. He'd driven me to the recruitment station in his beat-up pickup truck, shook the recruiter's hand, and told everyone at the VFW that his daughter was going to serve her country. He never lived to see me get promoted, never saw the medals I'd earned, but I knew he would have been proud. Would he be proud of Jessica now? Would he understand why his youngest daughter was ashamed of the family that raised her? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Jessica's Instagram, post after post of her new life. Charity galas, wine tastings, weekend trips to the Hamptons. In every photo, she looked perfect, polished, like she'd been born into that world instead of our cramped little house on Maple Street. There wasn't a single photo of our family. Not one picture of Dad, of our old house, of the life that had shaped her into the person who was capable of love in the first place. She'd erased us completely, like we were a rough draft she'd finally gotten the chance to rewrite. But what Jessica didn't know, what she'd forgotten in her rush to reinvent herself, was that I'd already requested leave for her wedding. 2 weeks of vacation time that I'd planned to spend celebrating my little sister's happiness, helping with last-minute details, being the maid of honor she'd asked me to be before she decided I wasn't appropriate for the role. I wasn't going to waste that leave sitting in my apartment feeling sorry for myself. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to remind Jessica and her new family exactly who they were dealing with. Not the embarrassing diner waitress from her manufactured backstory, but Sergeant Sarah Martinez, United States Army, decorated veteran of 3 combat tours. If she wanted to pretend I didn't exist, she'd have to do it while looking me in the eye. I walked to my closet and pulled out my dress blues. The fabric was crisp, the brass polished to a mirror shine. Each ribbon told a story of sacrifice, of nights spent in foxholes, of carrying wounded comrades to safety, of choosing service over safety. Jessica might have forgotten who I was, but I was about to remind her. And more importantly, I was about to remind myself. The next morning, I started gathering intelligence like I was planning a mission, because, in a way, I was. This wasn't about crashing Jessica's wedding out of spite. This was about standing up for every service member who'd ever been told their sacrifice wasn't good enough for polite society. My first call was to my friend Amy, who worked at the florist Jessica had hired. Amy and I had served together briefly before she got out and started her own business. When I explained the situation, her response was immediate and furious. She uninvited you? Her own sister? The one who's literally fought for this country? Amy's voice carried that particular outrage that only came from someone who understood military sacrifice. Sarah, I've been working on her arrangements for months. She's had me change the flowers 3 times because they weren't sophisticated enough for the Whitmore family standards. I need to know the details, Amy. Venue, timing, everything. The Whitmore Country Club, obviously. Cocktail hour starts at 5, ceremony at 6:30. It's black tie, which makes sense now why she didn't want you there. Can't have anyone in uniform upstaging the designer gowns, right? Amy's sarcasm cut deep because it was probably true, but she wasn't done. You know what's really sick? She had me remove your name from the centerpiece cards last week. Said there was a change in the wedding party. I thought maybe you couldn't get leave. I have leave. She just decided I wasn't appropriate anymore. Bullshit. Amy's florist vocabulary took a decidedly military turn. I'm looking at the original seating chart right now. You were at table 2, right next to the parents. Now there's just an empty space where your name used to be. An empty space. That's what I'd become in Jessica's new life. Not even a memory, just absence. Amy, I need you to do something for me. Can you find out if there are any other military guests? Give me an hour. While I waited, I called the VFW where Dad used to drink coffee with his buddies every Saturday morning. Frank Kowalski answered. He'd served in Vietnam and had known our family for 20 years. Sarah, how's my favorite soldier girl? It's Sergeant now, Frank. Listen, I need to ask you something. Did Jessica ever come by the hall to tell you about her wedding? There was a long pause. Honey, we haven't heard from Jessica since your dad's funeral. We all figured we'd get invitations, you know? Your dad was so proud of both his girls. We've been wondering why we never heard anything. My heart sank. Of course, Jessica hadn't invited Dad's friends. They were reminders of the life she was trying to erase. Working-class veterans who drank Budweiser and told stories about Vietnam and Desert Storm. Frank, can I ask you to do something for me? Can you call the guys and ask if anyone got invited to Jessica's wedding? I'm starting to think she's been more selective than I realized. You got it, kiddo. But Sarah, is everything okay? You sound different. Everything's about to be okay, Frank, I promise. Amy called back with intel that made my blood boil. I checked with the other vendors, the photographer, the DJ, the caterer. Sarah, there are no military guests. None. Not even the Whitmore family friends who served. It's like she deliberately excluded anyone in uniform. What about her college friends? The ones who knew our family? 3 people from her college sorority, and they're all from families similar to the Whitmores. Everyone else is either Bradley's prep school buddies or country club connections. Jessica hadn't just uninvited me. She'd systematically erased our entire background from her wedding. No military, no working-class families. No one who might accidentally mention that the bride's sister was a decorated combat veteran. That evening, I drove past the Whitmore Country Club to do reconnaissance. The building was exactly what I'd expected. Stone facade, circular driveway, valet parking, and the kind of understated luxury that whispered money instead of shouting it. Through the windows, I could see the staff setting up for tomorrow's event. White linens, crystal glasses, flower arrangements that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. It was beautiful, elegant, and completely foreign to everything Jessica and I had grown up with. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Found out something you need to know. Bradley's best man is ex-Navy. Rich kid who did 4 years as an officer, got out and went to work for Daddy's investment firm. Word is he's been telling people military enlisted are a different class of people. I stared at the message, feeling something cold settle in my chest. A different class of people. like we were somehow lesser because we'd chosen service over privilege, sacrifice over safety. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the conversation I'd overheard, about Jessica's voice when she'd called me the Sarah situation that needed to be handled. I thought about Dad, who'd worked double shifts to pay for Jessica's college, who'd been so proud when she got into a good school, who'd never lived to see her turn into someone who was ashamed of where she came from. At 3 in the morning, I got up and pulled out a box from under my bed. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all from Jessica during my deployments. I spread them across my kitchen table and started reading. Sarah, I miss you so much. Everyone here thinks you're so brave. I tell them all about my sister, the soldier. I saw on the news about attacks in your area. Please be safe. I need my big sister to come home. Dad's so proud he can barely contain himself. He shows your picture to everyone at the garage. I can't wait for you to meet Bradley. He's going to love you. He says anyone brave enough to serve our country is someone he wants to know. That last letter was dated just 18 months ago. 18 months from he wants to know you to you're not appropriate for our wedding. What had changed? When had my service gone from something to be proud of to something to be hidden? I knew the answer, even if I didn't want to admit it. It had changed when Jessica realized that being proud of her military sister didn't fit with the image she was trying to project. When she discovered that the Whitmore family and their social circle saw enlisted service members as the help rather than heroes. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, which felt appropriate for what I was about to do. I spent an hour pressing my dress blues, polishing every piece of brass until it gleamed, making sure my ribbons were perfectly aligned. Each medal told a story. The Purple Heart from the day I'd pulled 2 wounded soldiers to safety while under fire, the Combat Action Badge from missions I still couldn't talk about, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal that represented 3 years of my life spent 8,000 miles from home. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw not an embarrassment to be hidden, but a soldier who'd earned her place through blood and sacrifice. My phone rang. It was Frank from the VFW. Sarah, I called everyone. Not one of your dad's buddies got invited to this wedding. Hell, even Joe Murphy didn't get an invitation. And he's been like family to you girls since your mom died. Joe Murphy, Dad's best friend who'd helped Jessica move into her first apartment, who'd walked her down the aisle at her high school graduation when Dad was deployed with the National Guard. Jessica had erased him too. Frank, can I ask you something? If you were me, what would you do? Honey, your dad raised you to stand up for what's right. He raised you to be proud of who you are and what you've done. If some people can't see the honor in that service, that's their loss, not yours. Even if it means ruining Jessica's wedding? Sarah, your sister's the one who ruined her wedding the moment she decided her family wasn't good enough for her new life. I hung up and made my final decision. I was going to that wedding, but not to cause a scene. I was going to remind everyone in that room, including Jessica, that honor and sacrifice come in many forms, and some of us had paid a price they couldn't even imagine. At 4:30, I put on my dress blues and headed to the Whitmore Country Club. The valet looked surprised when I pulled up in my 10-year-old Honda Civic between a Mercedes and a BMW, but he took my keys politely. The parking lot was full of luxury cars, each one worth more than I made in a year. But I hadn't come here to compete with their wealth. I'd come to represent something money couldn't buy. I walked through the front doors of the country club at exactly 5 o'clock when cocktail hour was beginning. The lobby was marble and mahogany with oil paintings of fox hunts and yacht races. It smelled like expensive cologne and fresh flowers. And the moment I stepped into the reception area, wearing my full military dress uniform with every ribbon and medal I'd earned, the entire room went silent. I could see Jessica across the room, stunning in a cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, holding a champagne flute and laughing with an older woman who had to be Mrs. Whitmore. But as the silence spread through the room like ripples on water, Jessica's laugh died in her throat. She turned, saw me standing in the doorway, and her face went completely white. She works at a diner. I heard her whisper to the woman beside her, but the words hung unfinished in the sudden quiet. Mrs. Whitmore followed Jessica's gaze, took in my uniform, my ribbons, my bearing, and her expression shifted from confusion to something that might have been respect. That, said a voice from somewhere in the room, is a Purple Heart. The speaker was an older gentleman in a tuxedo, probably Bradley's father's age, but his posture screamed military. He approached me with the measured steps of someone who'd worn a uniform himself. Ma'am, he said, extending his hand. Colonel James Harrison, retired Air Force. It's an honor. And just like that, the spell was broken. Other guests began to move, to whisper, to crane their necks to get a better look at the soldier who'd just walked into their country club cocktail party. Jessica was making her way toward me, her face a mixture of panic and fury. But before she could reach me, Bradley's father intercepted her path. Jessica, dear, Mr. Whitmore said, his voice carrying across the room, aren't you going to introduce us to your sister? The way he said sister made it clear that everyone in the room now knew exactly who I was and exactly what Jessica had tried to hide. Jessica's face crumpled for just a moment, not with sadness, but with the realization that her carefully constructed narrative had just been destroyed by my mere presence. Everyone, she said, her voice artificially bright. This is my sister Sarah. She was in the army. Is, I corrected gently but firmly. I am in the army. Sergeant Sarah Martinez, currently on leave. Colonel Harrison smiled. Afghanistan? 3 tours, sir. The room shifted around us. Suddenly, I wasn't the embarrassing family member Jessica had tried to erase. I was a decorated veteran, someone worthy of respect and attention. The very people she'd been trying to impress were now looking at me with interest, asking questions about my service, thanking me for my sacrifice. Mrs. Whitmore appeared at my elbow. Sergeant Martinez, I had no idea Jessica had a sister in the military. How exciting. You simply must sit with us at dinner. I want to hear all about your experiences. I saw Jessica's face over Mrs. Whitmore's shoulder. The panic was gone, replaced by something worse. The dawning realization that her attempt to hide me had backfired spectacularly. Instead of protecting her image, she'd revealed something ugly about herself to the very people she'd been trying to impress. Actually, I said, looking directly at Jessica, I wasn't planning to stay for dinner. I just came to congratulate my sister and meet her new family. Nonsense, Colonel Harrison boomed. We can't let a Purple Heart recipient slip away so easily. Bradley, come meet your sister-in-law. Bradley appeared as if summoned, tall and blonde and exactly what you'd expect from someone named Bradley Whitmore III. He extended his hand with a politician's smile. Sarah, I've heard so much about you. I shook his hand and looked him in the eye. Funny, I haven't heard anything about you. Jessica told me the wedding was family only. The smile faltered just slightly. Behind him, I could see his groomsmen, the best man Marcus had mentioned, who thought enlisted personnel were a different class of people. There must have been some misunderstanding, Bradley said smoothly. Of course you're welcome here. Your family. Family, I repeated, still looking at Jessica. Right. The photographer appeared as if from nowhere, camera at the ready. Oh, perfect. Can we get some shots of the bride with her military sister? This is exactly the kind of authentic moment that makes weddings special. Jessica's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Panic, anger, resignation. She'd spent months crafting the perfect image for this wedding, carefully curating every detail to impress the Whitmore family and their social circle. She'd never expected that the sister she'd tried to erase would become the most interesting person in the room. Of course, Jessica said through gritted teeth. Sarah, would you like to take some photos? I smiled at her, the same smile I'd given enemy combatants who'd tried to intimidate me. Calm, confident, and completely unafraid. I'd be honored, little sister. As the photographer positioned us, I leaned close to Jessica's ear and whispered, You tried to erase me, but you can't erase what I've earned. She stiffened, but the camera was already flashing, capturing what would become the most memorable photo of her wedding day, the bride in her designer dress, standing next to her sister in full military uniform, both of them smiling for very different reasons. I stayed for exactly 1 hour, long enough to meet everyone, to be thanked for my service a dozen times, to watch Jessica's carefully constructed narrative crumble around her. long enough to remind everyone in that room, including myself, that honor isn't something you can buy or fake or hide. It's something you earn. As I prepared to leave, Colonel Harrison approached me one more time. Sergeant Martinez, I hope you know how proud your family must be of you. I looked across the room at Jessica, who was surrounded by people asking why she'd never mentioned having a decorated veteran for a sister. Some of them are, sir, and that's enough. I walked out of the Whitmore Country Club with my head high, leaving behind a room full of people who would never again think of Jessica without remembering the sister she'd tried to hide. The sister who'd served her country with honor while Jessica was busy trying to buy her way into respectability. Mission accomplished.